In the context of Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch, the corruption of consent is the foundational crack in the moral universe. It represents the moment when authority was replaced by raw power. When the text specifies that they took wives from any they chose, it describes a world where the subjective want of the powerful overrode the objective right of the individual. This is the seed of every system of enslavement that followed. The theology of the choice. In the original design of creation, humans were given dominion over the earth, but never over other humans. The Watchers broke this by introducing a predatory hierarchy, the devaluation of the human soul. By choosing based purely on physical attraction, they saw that they were attractive. The Watchers reduced complex, spiritual human beings to mere objects of desire. This is the psychological root of enslavement. Seeing a person as a thing to be acquired rather than a who to be respected. The erasure of boundary. Consent requires a boundary between self and other. The Watchers, possessing celestial power, ignored the boundaries of human families and individual wills. They established the precedent that superiority in strength equals ownership. The expansion from divine to systematic. The trickle-down effect mentioned in the corruption of the earth turned a single act of rebellion into a global philosophy of domination. The normalization of force, because the sons of God were seen as mighty and of renown. Their behavior became the aspirational model for human leaders. Human kings and mighty men, the Gibram, began to mirror this behavior. If the heavens could take what they wanted from the earth, then the strong on earth could take what they wanted from the weak. The birth of the property logic, this corruption transformed the human body into a commodity. Domestic enslavement. It began with the forced taking of wives, treating women as the first assets in a power-based economy. Labor enslavement. As the Nephilim grew and required more resources, they applied the any they chose logic to labor. They did not ask for help. They demanded service. Institutionalization. By the time of the increasing corruption, the idea of freedom had been buried under the weight of renown. To be great in the pre-flood world was to own, to command, and to dominate. The Lord's response, He is flesh, in Genesis 6:2-3, when the Lord says, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh," it is a direct rebuke to this corruption of consent. By taking what they chose, the Watchers and the men who followed them tried to become like gods, immortal in their power and unaccountable in their actions. By limiting human life to 120 years, the Creator re-established a limit on how long one person could dominate another. Death became the final check on the might makes right philosophy, ensuring that no tyrant could enslave the earth forever. The lingering shadow even after the flood. The memory of this corruption of consent persisted. It reappears in history whenever a group decides that their superiority, whether by race, technology, or wealth, gives them the right to bypass the consent of others. The root of all such evil is the same, the belief that some people are choosers and others are merely chosen for use. In the narrative of Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch, the corruption of identity is the moment humanity lost the concept of a common brother-sisterhood. Before the descent of the Watchers, humans were seen as a single family. The arrival of the Nephilim introduced the world's first biological caste system, which serves as the ancient, spiritual blueprint for racism and xenophobia. The birth of the other, in a healthy world, difference is seen as variety within a whole. In the increasing corruption, difference was weaponized to create a hierarchy of value. The myth of bloodline superiority, the Nephilim, were the product of a divine and earthly union. Because they possessed the stature and renown of their celestial fathers, they viewed themselves as a separate, superior species. The root. This is the birth of the master bloodline ideology. It taught that certain individuals are born with a greater right to life, resources, and respect based purely on their DNA or heritage. The dehumanization. To justify their consumption of the Earth's resources, the Nephilim had to stop seeing ordinary humans as beings with souls. They redefined humanity as a utility mere cattle, or laborers meant to serve the mighty. The expansion. The culture of renown. The text refers to them as men of renown. Shem, in Hebrew, meaning name. This implies they were obsessed with their own status and legacy at the expense of others. 1. The erasure of equality. The presence of the Nephilim fundamentally broke the idea that all people are created equal. When a society sees one group as demigods and another as flesh, the moral obligation to treat everyone with dignity vanishes. This is the exact psychological mechanism used in systemic racism. The belief that one's race or blood confers a natural authority over others. 2. The ancestor of servile classes. The Book of Enoch describes the Nephilim as beings who could not be satisfied. As they exhausted the Earth's resources, they began to view the human population as a disposable resource. They created a world where identity was the only thing that mattered. If you weren't of renown, you were of nothing. This birthed the lie that some people are born to be nobles and others are born to be servile. It institutionalized the idea that the suffering of the lesser group is a necessary price for the comfort of the superior group. The divine rebuke. One flesh, one limit. When God looked upon the earth and saw this corruption of identity, the response was a radical reassertion of human commonality. My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. Genesis 6:2-3. By calling everyone flesh, the Creator stripped away the titles of mighty and renowned. He reminded the world that regardless of who your father was or how tall you stood, you were bound by the same mortality. The equalizer. The 120-year limit was a divine declaration that no bloodline is divine. It was an attempt to collapse the biological hierarchy and bring humanity back to a state of shared vulnerability. The lingering stain, the root of racism, survives today in the form of tribalism and supremacy, the lingering spiritual echoes of the Nephilim. It is the persistent urge to find a reason, skin color, origin, or status to place oneself above another. The story of the corruption serves as a warning. When we stop seeing ourselves as one flesh, we open the door to the same continual evil that once grieved the heart of God. In the narrative of the increasing corruption, the corruption of the land represents the shift from stewardship to extraction. It describes a world where the earth was no longer a mother to be honored, but a vault to be plundered. This shift is the spiritual and philosophical engine of colonization, the desacralization of the world before the descent of the Watchers. The earth was understood as a sacred trust. The corruption of the land occurred when the Watchers taught humanity to view the world through the lens of utility and dominance. 1. Signs of the earth and the end of harmony. When the Watchers taught the signs of the earth and the cutting of roots, they were introducing technocracy, the use of knowledge to manipulate the natural world for selfish ends. The root. Instead of living within the rhythms of the seasons, humanity began to force the earth. They learned to strip mine for the costly stones and coloring tinctures mentioned in Enoch. The shift. This transformed the land from a living partner into a silent object. Once you believe the land has no spirit or rights of its own, it becomes easy to justify the conquest of any territory that holds the resources you desire. 2. Metallurgy. The tools of dispossession. The Watchers' most devastating gift was the secret of iron and brass. By teaching the forging of swords and shields, they gave humanity the means to enforce their greed. The expansion. Armed with superior technology, tribes no longer stayed within their assigned boundaries. They realized they could cross into the lands of others and take by force what they had not planted. The logic of colonization. This created the first colonial impulse. The belief that a group with better weapons has a divine or natural right to displace those who live in harmony with the land. The act of renaming the world, in the biblical and Enochian tradition, naming is an act of authority. Under the increasing corruption, the men of renown, the Gibberim, began to rename the world in their own image. Erasure of history. Colonization is not just about taking land. It is about erasing the identity of the land. The mighty men replaced local traditions and sacred sites with monuments to their own egos. The extraction economy. They viewed the minerals, the forests, and the water as assets to be hoarded. The Book of Enoch notes that the Nephilim were so insatiable that they devoured all the acquisitions of men. When the local land was exhausted, they moved to the next territory, leaving a trail of environmental and social ruin behind them. This is the definition of a colonial machine. The cry of the earth, one of the most profound moments in the Book of Enoch, is when the earth itself speaks. And the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. 1 Enoch 7-6. The corruption had become so deep that the land groaned. It was not just humans who were being enslaved. The soil, the animals, and the atmosphere were being colonized by the Watcher's dark arts. The divine response, the great cleansing, the flood, was the ultimate decolonization. By covering the high mountains and the deep valleys, the Creator washed away the borders, the fortresses, and the minds of the Nephilim. It was an act of returning the earth to its original, unwound state, a reset that reminded humanity that the earth is the Lord's, and no man has the right to treat it as a mere prize for conquest. In the narrative of the increasing corruption, the corruption of desire is the final stage of the collapse. It represents the transformation of the human heart from a source of life into a bottomless pit. While the other corruptions dealt with how we treat others, this corruption deals with how we treat enough. It is the spiritual and psychological blueprint for greed and total consumerism. 1. The shift from being to having before the Watchers. Value was found in character, who a person was, and connection to whom they belonged. The Watchers introduced a new currency, external accumulation. The root of vanity. By teaching the beautifying of the eyelids and the use of costly stones, the Watchers didn't just teach fashion, they taught discontent. They introduced the idea that the natural self was insufficient and that value must be added through the possession of rare, extracted objects. The artificial need. This created the first luxury economy. Once value was tied to things that were scarce: gold, antimony, jewels, humans began to compete for those things. Greed is simply the fear of not having enough, combined with the pride of having more than others. 2. The engine of the world. Perpetual hunger. Genesis 6-5 describes a state where the intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. In the context of greed, continually refers to a hunger that can never be satisfied. The consumption of the earth. The Book of Enoch describes the Nephilim as having an insatiable appetite. They consumed the produce of the earth, then the animals, and finally, they turned on humanity. This is the ultimate endgame of unregulated greed. It eventually consumes the very systems that support it. Renown as a commodity. Success became a scorecard. Renown was no longer earned through wisdom or service. It was measured by the size of one's hoard and the lethality of one's weapons. This is the ancestor of modern consumerism, where identity is purchased rather than built. 3. The expansion. The justification of atrocity. Greed is the root because it provides the motive for the other evils you mentioned. Have you ever noticed how one small, bad decision can sometimes lead to another, and then another? until you're so far from where you started you can barely recognize yourself. It's like a snowball effect, right? Well, imagine that happening on a global scale, involving every single person. That's the core of a concept you might call totalized evil. It's not just about one person doing one bad thing. It's about an entire society becoming trapped in a downward spiral of corruption. This is exactly the picture we get of the world before the Great Flood in the story of Noah. It began subtly. People started to prioritize their own desires above everything else. Small acts of selfishness and jealousy slowly grew into widespread violence and corruption. A feedback loop was created. When everyone around you is acting without integrity, it becomes incredibly difficult to be the one person who holds on to what's right. The pressure to conform, to just go with the flow, becomes immense. Sin feeds sin, creating a culture where evil is not just present, but it's the norm. Think about it. Every thought, every intention was bent towards evil. The text says that the earth was filled with violence. This wasn't just physical fighting. It was a complete breakdown of justice, fairness, and compassion. Imagine a world with no trustworthy judges, no honest business deals, no safe streets. A world where the strong prey on the weak without any consequence, and where kindness is seen as a foolish weakness. When a society reaches this point, it loses its very foundation. There's no longer a shared sense of right and wrong to hold things together. It's a system that is actively destroying itself from the inside out. And how does the Creator react to this? With profound grief. It's described as a deep pain in his heart. This isn't the anger of a distant tyrant. It says the sorrow of a loving father watching his children willingly destroy themselves and everything beautiful he had made for them. He saw the world he created, which was meant for goodness and fellowship, consumed by a darkness so total that it was beyond repair. The regret mentioned is immense. It's the pain of seeing a beautiful creation turn into a source of constant pain and suffering. So, what's the solution when a system is corrupt to its very core? The story tells us the only way to restore goodness was to wash the slate clean. The flood wasn't just a punishment. It was a heartbreaking act of purification. It was a way to end the unstoppable cycle of violence and suffering, and to give the world a fresh start. It was the ultimate reset button, pressed out of a necessity born from total corruption. The waters cleansed the earth, removing the stain of totalized evil so that life, in its intended goodness, could begin anew with Noah and his family. It's a powerful story about how corruption can escalate and the extreme measures sometimes needed to bring back the light. After the flood, the totalized evil of the pre-flood world was physically dismantled. But the Book of Enoch explains that the spiritual essence of that corruption did not vanish. It remained as a lingering shadow, waiting for a new human vehicle to rebuild the machine of pain. This transition from the flood to the Tower of Babel shows how the roots of racism, colonization, and greed attempted to re-establish themselves in a new world. 1. The disembodied spirits, the internal loop, according to the Enochian tradition. When the physical bodies of the Nephilim were destroyed in the flood, their spirits, being half-celestial, could not pass into the typical afterlife. Instead, they became evil spirits, or demons, that roamed the earth. The mission. These spirits were hungry, but could not eat. They were thirsty, but could not drink. Their only influence was to whisper the old forbidden mysteries back into the ears of humanity. The result, they didn't need to use force anymore. They used temptation. They sought to reignite the greed for forbidden knowledge and the elfin desire for the renown that characterized the world before the water. 2. The rise of Nimrod. The new mighty man that totalized evil resurfaced in the figure of Nimrod. Genesis 10 describes him as a mighty hunter before the Lord. In many ancient commentaries, this is interpreted as a hunter of souls, the first man after the flood to reclaim the title of a Gibber mighty man. The rebirth of colonization. Nimrod didn't just build a city, he built an empire. He was the first to consolidate multiple tribes under a single throne. Moving into lands like Shinar to establish a centralized power. The return of domination. Just as the Watchers took wives as they chose, Nimrod took kingdoms as he chose. He sought to recreate the renown of the old world by centralizing all of humanity into one system. 3. The Tower of Babel. The machine rebuilt the Tower of Babel was the ultimate attempt to restart the totalized evil. It was the physical manifestation of the four roots. The greed for height. Let us make a name for ourselves. Genesis 11, 4. This was the pursuit of Shem renown, the exact goal of the Nephilim. It was the desire to reach the heavens, not through character, but through technology and ego. The colonization of thought. By having one language and few words, the system forced a forced unity. This is the root of domination, the erasure of individual identity and cultural diversity in favor of a single controllable mass, the enslavement of purpose. Every brick laid was a symbol of human labor, dedicated to the glorification of a few mighty men at the top. The individual became a brick, disposable and interchangeable. 4. The divine response. The confusion of tongues when the Creator saw the tower. He saw the machine of pain starting its engine once more. If humanity succeeded in this totalized state, the loop would become unbreakable. Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Genesis 11-6. This wasn't a fear of human success. It was a mercy for the weak. By confusing the languages, God broke the central power structure. The end of global domination. Without a shared language, the mighty men could no longer command the masses to build their monuments. The protection of diversity by scattering the people. God ensured that no single group could colonize the entire earth or enslave all of humanity under one identity. The lesson of the roots, the story of the tower, shows that even after a global reset, the root of all evil, the desire to be as gods through the oppression of others, remains a threat. The confusion of tongues was a way to force humanity to deal with the other as an equal, rather than a resource. The increasing corruption teaches us that true peace doesn't come from building higher towers or sharper swords, but from uprooting the greed and pride that tell us we are more than flesh. The Pact of Mutual Destruction isn't just a piece of ancient mythology. It is a profound psychological autopsy of how integrity dissolves within a group. By expanding on Semjaza's gambit, we can extract timeless lessons about peer pressure, accountability, and the sunk cost of moral compromise. The mechanics of the shared fall. Semjaza's brilliance and his malice lay in recognizing that isolation is the parent of repentance. If a single watcher had descended, the weight of their solitude would likely have driven them back to the gates of heaven in a plea for mercy. By enforcing the anathema, Semjaza created a synthetic home. He replaced the laws of the cosmos with the laws of the club. In this new micro-society, the standard of good was no longer divine will, but rather loyalty to the rebellion. This is the birth of the us versus them mentality that fuels every destructive cabal in history. Life lessons from the Descent 1. Beware the safety in numbers fallacy. The Watchers believed that if 200 of them sinned together, the sheer scale of the transgression would force a negotiation or dilute the punishment. The lesson. Consequences are rarely split like a bill at dinner. They are usually multiplied. Just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean the individual cost is lowered. True accountability is always an individual appointment. 2. Recognize hostage leadership. Semjaza didn't lead through inspiration. He led through entrapment. He made sure his followers were just as guilty as he was, so they couldn't betray him without destroying themselves. The lesson: if a leader or a friend group requires you to compromise your values as a test of loyalty, they aren't building a community, they are building a cage. Real leadership empowers your conscience. Toxic leadership demands you silence it. 3. The Hermon threshold, the point of no return. The Watchers used the summit of Mount Hermon as a psychological anchor. Once they descended from that peak, they convinced themselves they were past the point of saving. The lesson: the all is lost mentality is a trap. Often we stay on a destructive path because we feel we've already gone too far to turn back. However, the Enochian narrative suggests that the refusal to turn back is what seals the fate, not the initial step. The best time to stop a mistake was yesterday. The second best time is right now. 4. Innovation without ethics is a weapon. The Watchers brought heavenly secrets, metallurgy, cosmetics, enchantments to Earth. But because these tools were rooted in a rebellion, they were used for domination rather than elevation. The lesson: talent and knowledge are force multipliers. If your character is flawed, your success will only amplify those flaws. Skills without a moral compass don't solve problems. They just make the problems more sophisticated. The theft of the forbidden secrets represents a cosmic breach of protocol. In the Enochian tradition, knowledge is not inherently evil, but sequence and intent are everything. By handing over advanced technology and esoteric arts to a primitive humanity, the Watchers didn't liberate mankind, they over-leveraged it. They provided the how of power without the why of wisdom. The specializations of corruption. The Watchers didn't just teach general knowledge. They targeted the specific vulnerabilities of the human ego. 1. The weaponization of the earth. Azazel and Gadril. Azazel and Gadril are credited with the most violent shifts. They taught the mining of ores and the tempering of steel. The impact? Humanity moved from tribal skirmishes to organized slaughter. Before this, a conflict was limited by the strength of a fist. Afterward, it was limited only by the sharpness of a blade. The deception. Azazel also taught the use of antimony, eye makeup, and jewelry. This linked the art of war with the art of seduction, suggesting that both power and beauty are things to be manufactured and used to manipulate others. 2. The manipulation of destiny. Barakijal and Armaros, by teaching astrology and enchantments. These Watchers gave humans the impression they could bypass divine will or natural consequences. The impact. It replaced faith trusting the process with formula trying to hack the system. It gave people the illusion of control over the future, leading to anxiety and a reliance on shortcuts rather than character building. Life lessons from the Forbidden Secrets. 1. Capability must not outpace. Character. The Watchers gave humanity godlike tools, while we still had animal impulses. When a civilization gains the power to destroy before it gains the wisdom to restrain itself, catastrophe is inevitable. The lesson: just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Whether it's a new technology, a powerful weapon, or a social media algorithm, if our ethical maturity doesn't match our technical ability, we aren't advancing, we're just accelerating toward a crash. 2. The danger of the shortcut. The Watchers offered secrets that bypassed years of human discovery and spiritual evolution. It was instant enlightenment that required no sacrifice or discipline. The lesson: knowledge without the journey of earning it is hollow. When we take shortcuts to success or influence, we miss the internal growth that makes us capable of handling that success responsibly. Unearned power usually ends in self-destruction. 3. Aesthetics are not ethics. Azazel's introduction of cosmetics alongside weaponry is a profound metaphor. It suggests a world where how things look. Vanity is just as much a tool of domination as how things hit war. The lesson: we must be wary of surface-level fixes. In the modern world, we often use cosmetics, branding, filters, and curated personas to hide a lack of substance or to deceive others. Integrity is about what lies beneath the antimony. 4. Responsibility is local. Consequences are global. The Watchers likely thought they were being helpful or enlightened mentors, but they failed to see the systemic collapse their gifts would cause. The lesson? Small compromises in ethics for the sake of progress can ripple out into massive societal harms. We are responsible not just for our intentions, but for the predictable outcomes of what we release into the world. The Nephilim represent the physical and ecological debt incurred by the Watchers' rebellion. If the Watchers were the spark of corruption, the Nephilim were the resulting wildfire. In the Enochian tradition, they are depicted as a biological anomaly beings, with the appetites of gods, but the limitations of the material world. They were not just a race of giants, they were an entropy machine. The ecological collapse. A hunger without limit, the tragedy of the Nephilim is often described as a series of escalating consumptions. Because their physical forms were fueled by a celestial lineage, their caloric and energetic needs were staggering. The consumption of produce. They first depleted the agricultural output of the world, leading to mass famine for the humans who actually tilled the soil. The consumption of animals. They turned to the livestock and the wild beasts, disrupting the entire food chain. The consumption of humanity. Finally, they began to devour the very people who had birthed their lineage. This illustrates a terrifying law of nature. That which is born of imbalance cannot be sustained by the natural order. The Nephilim were too big for the world, and their existence turned the earth from a garden into a graveyard. Life lessons from the weight of the world. 1. The parasitism of untethered ambition the Nephilim didn't create. They only consumed. They are the ultimate symbol of a system or an individual that grows by draining its host. The lesson: success that comes at the expense of your foundation, your family, your health, or your community is not growth. It's a countdown. If your lifestyle requires the exhaustion of everything around you to stay afloat, you aren't a success. You are a predator. 2. The danger of giantism in systems in economics and sociology. The Nephilim represent too big to fail entities that eventually become too big to feed. When an organization, a government, or even a personal ego becomes so massive that it loses touch with the ground, it begins to prioritize its own survival over the well-being of the people it was meant to serve. The lesson: scale is not a substitute for sustainability. Always ask, is this growth manageable, or is it becoming a monster that will eventually turn on me? Small and stable is often more divine than large and chaotic. 3. The legacy of the parent. The Nephilim were the innocent initially victims of their parents' choices. The lesson: we must be mindful of the monsters we leave for the next generation. Whether it is environmental debt, unresolved trauma, or systemic injustice, the offspring of our bad decisions will have to live with the physical weight of our choices. Our forbidden unions today become the burdens of our children tomorrow. 4. The inevitability of the turning point. The texts describe a specific moment where the Nephilim turned from eating bread to eating people. This is the moment where unsustainable becomes predatory. The lesson: greed is a sliding scale. It never stays satisfied with enough. If you don't place internal boundaries on your desires, you will eventually find yourself crossing lines you once thought were unthinkable. Self-restraint is the only thing that keeps a giant from becoming a tyrant. Have you ever heard of the Watchers? In ancient texts, they're described as celestial beings who descended to Earth, and their story is more than just an old myth. It's a powerful warning about power, technology, and what happens when we forget to be humble. This descent wasn't just about fallen angels. It was a philosophical fracture that changed humanity forever. It shifted our growth from a journey of wisdom to a relentless pursuit of acquisition. Let's start with technological hubris. The Watchers handed over advanced knowledge, like metallurgy and weaponry, without the ethical framework to manage it. Suddenly, humanity had the power to create and destroy on a massive scale. The question, should we do this, was replaced by, can we do this? Sound familiar? Today, with AI genetic editing and automation, we're facing the same dilemma. The lesson here is profound. Competence is not a substitute for conscience. Just because we can build something doesn't mean it will benefit us. We have to ask if our tools empower humanity or just accelerate our ability to cause harm. Next, the Watchers' descent was an act of boundary crossing. They ignored the natural limits between their world and ours. This fostered a mindset where everything is seen as a resource to be exploited. The world stopped being a sanctuary and became a laboratory. Respect for the natural order was replaced by a drive for total control, stripping away mystery and sacredness. The life lesson here is that healthy boundaries are the architecture of peace. Whether it's our personal lives, the environment, or our digital privacy, some lines are drawn for our protection. When we believe we have the right to breach every wall just because we have the strength, we invite chaos into our lives. The Watchers also institutionalized violence. Before their arrival, conflicts were likely smaller, more personal. By teaching the art of war and the crafting of armor, they turned violence into an industry. Power was no longer about virtue or community. It was about dominating others with superior hardware. They promised security through better weapons, but what they delivered was a world of constant fear and escalation. This teaches us that an arms race is a trap, not a solution. True security isn't found in the swords we hoard, but in the strength of our character and our relationships. A system built on violence eventually consumes its own creators. The story of the Watchers culminates in the birth of the Nephilim, beings of immense power, whose insatiable appetites led to destruction. This is a clear metaphor for unsustainable growth. When success devours its own foundation, it's not success at all. It's a failure in disguise. The ultimate lesson from this ancient story is a call for a return to humility. The great tragedy wasn't the knowledge the Watchers brought, but the arrogance that came with it. It's a reminder that we are the stewards of what we know. Knowledge is a gift, but without the wisdom and humility to wield it correctly, it becomes a burden that our world simply cannot carry. Thanks for watching.